Okay, let's dive in. Ever think about time travel? Not the science fiction kind, but the real deal. The way we can actually glimpse lives, live centuries, maybe even millennia before we were around.
Hmm. Yeah. How do we know what happened
Mhm.
before our parents, our grandparents? Way, way back.
Exactly. It's this deep sort of human fascination with the past, isn't it? How do we even piece together those stories from so long ago?
It's that connection across time that's just so compelling. I mean, how do we, right here, right now, connect with moments that happened long before we could possibly remember them?
Absolutely. And that's really the core of what we're digging into today. We've got this stack of material here that lays out the absolute basics of history. What is it? How do we actually study it? And crucially, why does it even matter now? Plus, how we measure the incredibly long timescales involved.
Right. And our goal isn't just to read it out. We're going to unpack these pages together, pull out the really important ideas, and explore some of the details that make it all come alive. Hopefully, by the end, you'll have a much clearer handle on these fundamentals.
Okay, so let's jump right into that first big question these sources tackle. What actually is history? It's got to be more than just like a list of old events, right?
Precisely. According to this material, at its heart, history is really the story, the narrative of past events. It means studying, describing the details, the experiences of people who lived before our time.
And these pages make it clear it's not just about, kings and queens or big battles. It's about people. All sorts of people living in different places over huge stretches of time, figuring out how to live in their world, build communities, deal with each other.
Yeah, history tries to capture all of that. Think about your own history, even the bits you haven't seen yourself. Like
Hmm.
maybe you never met your great-grandmother,
Right, right.
or you weren't there when your school was built, or
Yeah.
maybe you only know about the founders of your town through stories people tell.
Those are definitely parts of my history I wasn't there for.
Exactly. And how do you know about them? The sources give examples. Maybe your dad told you about his grandmother, or you read an article about the school's construction, or the principal told a story about village elders.
Ah, okay. So it always comes back to where the information comes from.
Which leads us straight to the absolute cornerstone: sources. Everything we think we know about the past,
Mm.
it has to come from a source of some kind.
The raw material, basically. And this material we're looking at, it splits them into two main categories.
That's right. Literary sources and archaeological sources.
Literary. I guess that's the obvious one. Old writings, books, documents, things like that.
Exactly. Anything written down, essentially.
Yeah.
But the archaeological sources are, well, they're pretty amazing because they come literally from the ground.
You mean like digging things up?
Through careful digging, yeah, excavation. The incredible thing is the earth builds up in layers over time. So when you dig down, you're kind of digging back through time,
Older stuff tends to be deeper.
and newer stuff closer to the top. Right. It's almost like the earth itself is this huge layered archive.
Yeah.
And archaeological sources are the objects, the traces we find by carefully reading those layers.
Wow, that gives you a real sense of time being like physically layered into the world.
Yes.
Okay, so we know history is the story of past people, and we learn it from sources, writings, or things dug up, but why bother? Why is studying history actually important, according to these pages?
Well, this is where it gets really practical, actually. One of the main points here is that learning history helps us make sense of what's happening right now.
Okay.
And it gives us context, maybe even ideas for planning what we should do next for the future.
How does that work? Can you give me that example from the source? It sounded interesting.
Sure, the sources point to Sri Lanka's past, specifically a time when it was apparently known as the Granary of the East, celebrated for really successful agriculture.
Okay, Granary of the East. Got it.
And a key detail the source highlights is that there's no sign of the kind of environmental pollution back then that we might see today.
Ah, and the connection is to our current problems with, like, pesticides and chemical fertilizers.
Exactly that. The material suggests that by looking at how people managed agriculture successfully and in an environmentally friendly way back then, well, maybe we can find models or inspiration for tackling the environmental problems we're facing now because of modern methods.
So history isn't just looking back, it's potentially finding solutions for today.
That's a big part of the argument, yes. History is a source of potential solutions, not just old stories.
That's powerful. What else? What other benefits does studying history give us, according to this?
Another really fascinating benefit mentioned is understanding the origins of things.
Mm.
Things we see and use every single day, things we probably take for granted. The source uses this incredible example, tracing the history of the actual scripts we use for writing.
You mean like how the letters got their shapes?
Precisely that. It specifically mentions the Sinhala letter. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it shows visually how its form evolved over something like 2,250 years. Seeing how a simple symbol changed and adapted over 2 millennia just through human use. It connects you to that deep past in a really tangible way, doesn't it?
That's kind of mind-bending. History is literally baked into the alphabet. So, okay, wrapping up the why study it part from these sources,
Yeah.
it's not just an academic thing then.
Not at all. The big takeaway seems to be that getting a good grasp of the successes and, importantly, the failures of the people who came before us gives us really valuable guidance. That knowledge is described as a light, guiding how we should try to shape our future, how we think about developing our communities, our countries.
It gives us perspective, helps us maybe not repeat the same mistakes.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, history covers these immense stretches of time.
Mhm.
To make any sense of it, we obviously need ways to measure that time. What systems do these sources talk about?
Yes, organizing time is absolutely key. The material brings up a few methods, but it really focuses on the two you'll encounter most often.
And those are?
The system's built around before Christ, or BC, and Anno Domini, AD.
Right. Okay, let's just make sure that's crystal clear for everyone.
Sure. So BC refers to the time period before the traditionally accepted year for the birth of Jesus Christ. AD, which stands for Anno Domini, in the year of the Lord, is the period after that point.
And the sources give examples to nail that down.
They do. For instance, the arrival of Arahat Mahinda Thero in Sri Lanka is placed 250 years before Christ's birth. So that's written as 250 BC.
Okay.
And for an AD example, King Mahasan, who built the Minaria tank, is recorded as starting his reign 274 years after Christ's birth. So that's 274 AD.
Simple enough once you know that dividing line. But you mentioned other ways. The sources talk about ancient cultures having their own system.
They do, yes. Particularly in ancient India and Sri Lanka, systems like Buddhist years and Sakya years were common. And the material points out you still sometimes see these used today, maybe in almanacs or for specific cultural purposes.
Okay, tell me about the Buddhist era system. How does that work?
Right, the Buddhist era, or BE. It counts years, starting from the Mahaparinibbana, the passing away, the demise of the Lord Buddha. Now, the sources mention there's some scholarly debate on the exact date, but the widely accepted tradition places this event 544 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. So 544 BC.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Buddhist era system, that year, 544 BC, is considered the year 1 BE.
Ah, okay, so it's a different starting point, but they obviously relate to each other. That comparison timeline in the source must be helpful.
It really is. It lays it out clearly. So demise of Lord Buddha, 544 BC, is 1 BE. Then the birth of Jesus Christ, 1 AD, corresponds to 544 BE.
Right, because 544 years have passed since 1 BE.
Exactly. Then it shows King Vasabha starting his rule in 67 AD, which lines up with 611 BE. And King Mahasan starting his reign in 274 AD is 818 BE. Interestingly, for Sri Lanka becoming independent in 1948 AD, the source doesn't give a BE equivalent, probably because AD is just the standard for such recent world events now.
That timeline really clarifies how different calendars, anchored by different major events, run in parallel.
It does. And the sources also give a brief mention to others, like the Sakya years, a calendar linked to Hinduism, starting in 78 AD with a king named Gautamiputra Satakarni, and also the Hijri years, the Islamic calendar, which starts in 622 AD with the Prophet Muhammad's journey to Medina. It just underlines that history isn't one single timeline, is it? It's many interwoven threads.
Definitely. And what about the really, really old stuff? Before any of these calendars, we're talking hundreds of thousands of years back.
Yeah, for those vast time scales, way beyond written records or traditional calendars, the source just briefly notes that we have to rely on laboratory methods, scientific dating techniques to figure out how old things are.
Which sounds like a whole other fascinating deep dive for another time. Okay, so let's try and pull together the absolute core ideas from this material we've covered today. What are the main takeaways?
Okay, first, pretty much everything people did in the past, big or small, counts as history.
Got it. And second, we only know about that past because of sources, things left behind, which we can roughly group into literary, like writings, and archaeological, like objects found in the earth.
Third, studying this stuff isn't just, an academic exercise. It actually helps us understand the present and can guide how we approach the future.
Right, like the agriculture example.
Hmm.
And finally, to handle the huge time scale of history, we use systems to measure time. The most common are BC and AD, but it's useful to know about others, like the Buddhist era, and understand how they relate.
Absolutely. Getting those basic building blocks, what history is, where it comes from, why it matters, and how we measure it, that really gives you the foundation you need to make sense of pretty much any historical information you come across.
It really does. So if we take all that on board, history is everything people did. We learn it from clues. It helps us now and for the future. Here's a thought to leave you with. What if some seemingly tiny piece of your own personal history, maybe a story your grandmother told you, or an old photograph, or a letter you found, what if that holds an unexpected key? A clue to understanding something much bigger about the world you're living in right now? The echoes of the past are definitely all around us.